Is Sengoku Dynasty better than Medieval Dynasty? To preface, I'm not making this video to hate or bash on either of these games, because realistically I've enjoyed both experiences, but this may be the first time Medieval Dynasty has another Dynasty game that could potentially compete with the top spot. After playing the 1.0 full release of Sengoku Dynasty, I find myself wanting a lot of the systems in Medieval Dynasty and vice versa, so we're gonna go over many of the systems these games have to offer, and see which game does it better in my opinion, in hopes that Render Cube and Superkami could use these ideas and consider implementing them in both Medieval Dynasty and Sengoku Dynasty. Starting with Medieval Dynasty just runs smoother, simple as that. In Medieval Dynasty, I don't really get a lot of frame rate issues. I may get some when I have like the windmill spinning on the screen, or if I drop a ridiculous amount of items on the ground at once, which is pretty situational in both regards. But in Sengoku Dynasty, there are some highly populated areas, or areas with lots of objects in general, that gives me a lot of frame rate issues. When Sengoku initially came out into early access, there was a massive memory leak issue, and while it's definitely improved, there's more performance optimizations that still need to be done, especially considering Sengoku Dynasty has almost doubled the RAM usage. This could be due to the fact though that Sengoku Dynasty uses Unreal 5 while Medieval Dynasty is using Unreal 4, but regardless I gotta give this one to Medieval Dynasty. I may be biased because I come from a background of FromSoft games like Dark Souls and Elden Ring, and I've said it many times before, but combat in Medieval Dynasty, at least in regards to melee combat, is not very stimulating for my monkey brain. Meanwhile, Sengoku Dynasty recently reworked their combat and made it into like a Souls-light type combat system. It is still buggy at times, but I find it a lot more fun and engaging, and with a little polish and balancing, it vastly beats Medieval Dynasty's combat for me. This isn't me saying I want Souls-like combat in Medieval Dynasty, but I do find it more fun. Medieval Dynasty isn't really known for having an amazing or compelling story, to be fair, but at least if I say the names like Alwyn, Unigost, or Sambor, it's easy for me to say that there are characters who you know. In Sengoku Dynasty, the only person's name I really know is On Dong, and that's cause his name's got Dong in it. I know I'm childish. The NPCs in Sengoku Dynasty don't really have a lot of interesting things going on, and I think that's mostly because the game just doesn't have a lot of quests. Questing is one of the weaker parts of Sengoku Dynasty, I would say, and I really hope they add not only procedural quests like they've mentioned, but some compelling story quests, for example with characters like Akko, Sayuri, or Kengyo. Now hear me out. Medieval Dynasty does village management really well, but the way Sengoku Dynasty expand on the management makes me wish so many of these systems were incorporated into Medieval Dynasty. For example, to keep your villagers happy in Medieval Dynasty, you need to make sure your villagers have access to food, firewood, water, and housing. Sengoku Dynasty also asks for these things, but in addition to these, you also have to take into account the village maintenance, security, villager health, spiritualism, and luxury once you invite enough refugees into your town. Maintenance includes like planks and chiseled stone to keep up with building repairs, building up guard towers and assigning guards, which require upkeeping weapons for said guards, fulfilling spiritual and luxury needs, and healing salves and medicines to keep your villagers happy and healthy. I don't know if Medieval Dynasty needs maintenance needs, since we have repairing and building huts, but the guard towers, medicines, and luxury requirements are a great idea. I still think the resource management and setting up villages works a lot better in Medieval Dynasty, and I don't really like the fact that Sengoku Dynasty refugees don't have skill points that allow them to gather faster, like the 6 skills that the villagers have in Medieval Dynasty. Villager, or refugee housing rather, also works a bit differently in Sengoku Dynasty, as depending on your house size, you can have way more villagers of any combination in the same house together. Certain workplaces also have access to beds to house extra villagers, in addition to the ability to create extra crafting stations in or around your building instead of having to build a whole new building entirely. I really want to give this point to Medieval Dynasty, but the housing system, in addition to the upkeep of security and health, would be amazing changes to Medieval Dynasty's format, so I'm giving Sengoku Dynasty this one. Medieval Dynasty's UI is very polished, and while I don't think Sengoku's is bad per se, perusing village management, the knowledge tab, even assigning villagers to work is much more user-friendly in Medieval Dynasty. I do like that Sengoku allows multiple map markers though. Crafting UI is pretty much the same in both games when it comes to crafting wheels and building, but due to the fact that Sengoku has so many more different types of craftables, it can be hard to navigate and find the items you're looking for sometimes. So I'm gonna give this one to Medieval Dynasty. This isn't so much that Medieval Dynasty's skills are bad. I do like the skills for the most part, but I do think the skill tree could use a little revisit. I've said it before, but I'm not really a huge fan of the knowledge skills due to how little XP they give. And with the addition of the new combat tactics, it could be interesting to add combat-based skills to unlock like combos, dash attacks, heavy attacks, and so on. Early on, Sengoku's skill trees were pretty bare bones, but the new skill trees have many more choices and give you a lot more control on how you build your character, your village, as well as the addition to combat focused skills. I'm giving this one to Sengoku Dynasty. I'd like to apologize to all my village building lovers in Medieval Dynasty because this one's not even close. Building a house is pretty much the same. You pull out your hammer, you hit the building parts until the building is done. But it's not about the building part itself, but everything around building. Anything in your resource storage can be used to build buildings in your village, and the resources do not need to be in your inventory. That could be a cool custom game setting in Medieval Dynasty, to be honest. But not only that, after placing down a building, built or not, you can move the entire building without having to rebuild it. This is a huge quality of life that also makes decorating a lot easier. And we're not done yet. In Sengoku Dynasty, the inside of the houses and workplace, there's a grid where you're able to place objects like beds, fireplaces, tables, chairs, lights, the works, allowing a lot more control of how your house looks like inside and out. Already after a year of development, it already feels like Sengoku has a lot more unique decorations to work with than Medieval Dynasty. But the thing that really pushes Sengoku Dynasty to the top of this list for me is the ability to plant bushes, trees, mushrooms, and foliage. I feel like there's a lot more to work with, so if you come to this game looking for the decoration aspect, you may find yourself liking this one a bit more than Medieval Dynasty. Also, snappable fences, hello? Next topic is not forgetting to pay the king's tax of 1 like, 1 sub, or 1 membership. I will use the tax money to crash the flatbread market. Progression's very different when comparing both games. In Medieval Dynasty, you earn tech points by you and your villagers completing certain actions in the game, and once you have enough tech points, you unlock new buildings and can spend money to unlock recipes. With Sengoku, you can still use money to unlock recipes, but a lot of good recipes are locked behind liberating areas on the map. On the Sengoku map, you have around 11 regions, all in need of liberation. And to liberate a region, you have a task list that involves defeating bandits, clearing leaders out of their camps, or assisting in the construction of special projects, which could be like bridges, shrines, and watchtowers. I like the progression system in Sengoku because it feels like you're actually earning your reputation through defeating threats and helping rebuild areas that are unfinished or have been destroyed. Giving this point to Sengoku Dynasty. In terms of size, Sengoku's map feels a lot bigger, especially compared to the Oxbow, allowing for a lot more choices and village locations. Graphically, I think Medieval Dynasty has Sengoku Dynasty beat, as all the environmental details look a lot more polished and realistic. That is until you get to the environmental details. Sengoku's environmental effects look really good. The snow looks nice, and you leave like a little trail behind you when you're running. The rain and thunderstorms are awesome, and the fact that when it rains you have like these little puddles on the ground, honestly I love it. When it comes to player models, however, Sengoku's character models could be a bit more visually appealing. The NPCs and character models in Medieval Dynasty just look better. You can call me biased on this one as well because I kind of like the Europe setting a bit more than feudal Japan, but my point goes to Medieval Dynasty on this one. Neither games have crazy good character creators. I think we can all be honest here, but Sengoku's character creation is lacking massively. To be fair, the character creator hasn't been around for a long time, and the Medieval Dynasty one has only been around for about a year. But at least now you can choose whether you want to be a man or a woman. We still need more hairstyles, more faces, just more choices in general. At this point, hairstyle choices for men is a top knot and balding, or Asmongold in a year or two. Medieval Dynasty wins this category. Medieval Dynasty wins this one by default, because at the moment there's no animal husbandry in Sengoku. Hopefully we get pigs, chickens, cows, horses, and any other farm animals that fit the setting in the future updates. Rotatable fields, need I say more? But really though, the farming system is a lot more simpler in Sengoku Dynasty, and I still ultimately prefer the Medieval Dynasty farming system, but I'm gonna give both games a point specifically for this one outlier. People have been dying for rotatable fields in Medieval Dynasty. Animals in Medieval Dynasty not only look better, but fighting them just feels a lot better. This is something that could use a lot of improvement in Sengoku. Animal damage feels a bit unbalanced, animal pathing isn't that great, and ranged combat feels too simple. There's not really any wobble or shakiness when you're aiming down sights on a bow. You're just like the most stable straight shooter out there, which makes hunting easier, sure, but I definitely enjoy the challenge and the feel of ranged weapons more in Medieval Dynasty. This may not be a fair point to Medieval Dynasty devs and the fans, because the devs really haven't shown much interest in adding spiritual or religious themes in the game, and I think many Medieval Dynasty players have been fine with that. But if the goal of the game is to be as historical as possible, I think it's a disservice to the game that there's no churches, crosses, pagan shrines, or festivals, cathedrals, etc. Sengoku Dynasty, on the other hand, has the opposite view. Shrines to gods like Amaterasu and Ryujin and other gods are found all over the map, which will give you stacking movement speed buffs when you give specific offerings to shrines. I really only see this as a net positive in the game, not only for the benefits but for the immersiveness as well. I feel like a big identity for feudal Japan, and to be fair, this could be mostly because I watched too much Inuyasha as a kid, but you gotta have the shrines, the shrine priestesses, and the monks. So ultimately this one goes to Sengoku. This is an easy point to Medieval Dynasty. While you can get married and have a kid in Sengoku Dynasty, you can't pass your legacy on to your heir just yet, and there's not a whole lot to do with them right now. The heir system just isn't in a finished place yet. It needs a lot of work, but with the work the devs have been putting in the last year, I'm sure it's gonna get there. I do think it would be cool if Sengoku tried to add on to the system, like having certain items, recipes, or locations on the map that are inaccessible until you hand over your dynasty or your heir grows up. So is Sengoku Dynasty better than Medieval Dynasty? I really think that's up to personal preference, but I do think both games could learn a lot from each other. I feel like Sengoku Dynasty has been using Medieval Dynasty as a blueprint for their own development, but still adding their own spin, which makes it stand out as more of its own game. And let's be honest guys, this game's only been out for a year. It just left early access, and it's made massive improvements in a year's time. Definitely isn't perfect or as polished, which is why I ultimately think Medieval Dynasty comes out on top for me personally, but Medieval Dynasty has had more years in the oven, and I'm hoping for a little friendly competition between the two devs, because competition ultimately is going to produce a better game for the consumers. And who knows, maybe in a year things will change. Let me know what y'all think in the comments below, and consider checking out the video on the screen right here. Honestly, I've enjoyed all my time in both games. I hope to see both games pop off and be successful for years to come. But until next time, thanks for watching, and take care.